and a half, and she'll pause at any time that you guys have questions, I'm sure, but then we'll save time for questions and answers at the end. So please do jump in and ask whatever comes to mind, because it's just wonderful to have her here. So I'm going to read her bio and what she'll be talking about today. It's kind of melded together. So Kitty Westin is the founder of the Anna Westin Foundation, which closed in 2008 and transferred its assets to the Emily Program Foundation. Kitty is the current president of the Emily Program Foundation, which aims to eliminate eating disorders through advocacy and education. Kitty is the past president and serves on the board of the Eating Disorders Coalition for Research, Policy, and Action, and she has been an active member of several Academy for Eating Disorder committees, including serving as co-chair of the Advocacy Committee. Hello, Cash. Kitty became an activist after her daughter, Anna Westin, died of an eating disorder in 2000. She has spoken to millions of people across the globe about the devastating effects of eating disorders through public appearances and the media. She's been honored for her work and has received advocacy awards from the Eating Disorders Coalition, the Academy for Eating Disorders, and the National Eating Disorders Association, and the Park Nicollet Foundation. So on that note, I'm just delighted to turn it over to Kitty.
Okay, I'm going to do this. Stealing my thunder here. I am so happy to be here for a number of reasons. This is a return to Rosewood for me. I was here 11 years ago when we were first looking at opening the very first residential treatment center in Minnesota for people struggling with eating disorders. And it was a much different facility then. It was, I think, the adolescent, it was in that one building that's now the adolescent program. So it's really exciting to be back. And most of all, it's exciting to be back because that's where I was on Sunday and Monday. And it was snowy and cold, and those are two wolves. And I was panicky because I have a 5.5-pound Shih Tzu. It was like, Mark, where's Opal? And this is what it looks like today. And that was the headlines in the morning paper. Dozens of crashes, snarl commute, storm cuts power, and closes schools. So, do I really have to go back tomorrow? Or tonight? I'm going back tonight. Can I have a job?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
What do you want to do?
Okay. So what I'm going to do today is talk about our story. And really, it's a story of hope, I promise you. So bear with me, okay? My daughter died of an eating disorder. That began the story of hope. We're going to talk a lot about advocacy and the federal advocacy that I do through the Eating Disorders Coalition. And really, anytime you want to stop me and ask questions, please do. I really like that when I'm doing presentations. Okay, so I'm here because eating disorders affect all of us. Eating disorders, there's almost 14 million people in the United States that struggle with eating disorders. Eating disorders are underserved and under-recognized. Eating disorders get very few research dollars. For every person with an eating disorder in the United States, the NIH, the National Institute of Health, gives, I think it's $1.29, I don't need to get it exact, per person with an eating disorder, compared to $159 per person with schizophrenia. Now, go ahead.
Is that per year, per day, per month?
Per year. So I'm not opposed to that research going into schizophrenia at all. I think that's a really good thing, but the disparity really bothers me a lot. And so we need to work to get enough funding for research into eating disorders. Eating disorders are prevalent. They don't discriminate. They don't discriminate based on gender, based on economic, based on partisan. They don't just affect Republicans or Democrats or independents. They affect all of us. And I'm mostly here because my daughter, Anna Westin, who was born on November 27th, 1978, died on February 17th, 2000 from anorexia. And I can tell you this honestly, and the treatment professionals here in the room will back me up on this, nobody should die from an eating disorder. It is not necessary. If people have access to the care they need, the level of care they need for the length of time they need it, people truly, fully recover and go on to lead rich, full, wonderful lives. So please remember that. So what happened? How do you go from from this bouncing baby girl at age 1 to struggling and suffering from a severe illness at age 20. How does that happen? Anna grew up in a family that loved and cherished her and spent a lot of time with her and raised her. We had so much fun together. This is a picture of Anna with her sister Sarah. And Sarah is 2 years younger than Anna. And this is a picture of us vacationing in Montana, doing a rafting trip. And you know, we spent a lot of time together. We had meals together. We did all those things together. And as you guys know, eating disorders are not behavior problems. They are not choices. They are not character flaws. They are not weaknesses. What are they? Real illnesses, biologically based illnesses. There's a lot of contributing factors. And I can tell you that with our beautiful daughter Anna, did I ever say anything or do anything that might have contributed to her eating disorder? Probably yes. I probably talked about diets because I'm a woman and I grew in this culture. I probably said things, did things, maybe, I don't know, but I know, guess what I know? I didn't cause it. I didn't cause her eating disorder. So, Anna was friendly and funny and artistic and engaging. She worked in summers and when she was home from college at a residential program for people with severe developmental disabilities. And she had so much compassion and so much love, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. She loved her sisters. Mary is right here, and Mary is now 28 years old, and that's Anna in the middle, and then Sarah, who is now 31 years old. And I will tell you that Anna and Sarah did not know how they could recover from their sister's death any more than my husband and I did. When she died, it felt like an atomic bomb went off in our family. And we had no idea how to pull pieces back together and be a family again. And we were determined that we were not going to let anorexia destroy the rest of us. And we didn't know how that was going to happen, but we knew we had to make it happen. So we worked really hard to pull ourselves back together. And the work I've been doing since then is what has gotten us all through. And I just heard a story, just 10 minutes ago, from somebody in this room that benefited from some of the early work we did in Minnesota, suing our insurance company. So it's pretty incredible how what goes around comes around. It's amazing to me. And those are the stories of hope. And that's why I say my story is truly a story of hope. And that while I'm selfish, I would love to have Anna back. If somebody said magically you could undo all the good that's happened since your daughter died, and you could have her back, I'd say, okay, I'll take her. Because that's how much I miss her. Every single day I miss her. But I can't do that. And that's not my choice, and there's nothing I can do. So for us, knowing that people are getting the care they need, and that there's so much more awareness of eating disorders, there's so many more resources from when Anna was sick that, that has really helped all of us in our family and recover. Anna was thoughtful and introspective and caring. She was artistic, she wrote, she read, all of those kinds of things. And she was really funny. She just had this wonderful sense of humor. She always kept us all laughing. And she loved her black lab. And this is our black lab, Kaya, who grew up with Anna and died just a couple of years ago, but we have another one named Olive now, so I love Cash. I don't know where Cash went now, but Cash can join me anytime he wants. So Anna was really, really sick with her eating disorder, and she wrote about how the struggle with it. And again, I hadn't read her journals until probably 3 to 5 years after she died, because it was just too painful to read it. But once I read it, I started thinking, I need to incorporate some of her words in my talks, because I think it really describes the pain and the suffering. And I think it just says a lot about what she was going through. And she used to say things to me And I'm sure some of you have thought this, Mom, I would rather have been in a really bad car wreck and be battered and broken and have casts on my body, because then people would really know how painful this is. Instead of thinking that she could just get over it, or just eat, or something simple like that. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't we all love it if that was the solution? You know, I mean, it would be great, but it's not, because they're real illnesses. And Anna had so many friends, and she was just deeply loved by everybody that knew her. And Anna, you know, as she got sicker and sicker, my life is worthless right now. Saying goodbye to such an unfriendly place can't be as hard as believing it, and essentially my spirit has fled already. She committed suicide on February 17th, 2000. She was 21 years old. So how do you go from this bright, spirited, intelligent woman with dreams and hopes and a future to getting to this place where she felt that hopeless? And I truly believe, I absolutely, truly believe this, that if Anna had had the access to the care she had, she would be alive today. I truly believe that. I don't doubt that for a second. So how did we do that? How did we manage to move from the horror of losing a daughter to suicide, and to an eating disorder? How did we recover from that? And this is where really the hope comes in. I really do believe, I know, that Anna was really affected by the toxic culture that we all live in. I don't think anybody in this room will disagree with that. And then her biology. And hi, Cash. In our family, there's lots of depressive disorders. I have one. Anxiety disorders, chemical dependency, and I think Anna was genetically loaded. And we didn't know that anybody else in the family had an eating disorder until after Anna died. And now there are three of my cousin's kids, so I don't know what that makes them, anyway, to her, that have very serious eating disorders. And so when we talk about the genetics and the biological link, it's true, it's real. We had to find a way to transform the horror of it into something positive. I would not be here today if I didn't find a way to do that. I couldn't have survived it. It was so painful. So we started the Anna Westin Foundation within days of Anna's death. And I made it up. I'll tell you the story. We were at the funeral home, and we were writing the obituary, and the people were really nice, and that's something nobody ever should have to do, is write an obituary for a child. I mean, it's just not, it's unspeakable. And he was saying, you know, he was asking us, how do we want to write this? And the first thing he said was, well, you know, Kitty and Mark, when somebody commits suicide, oftentimes people say they died at home, unexpectedly. And I was incredulous. I was like, no, she died from an eating disorder. And we're going to say that. I am not ashamed of that. I am not angry at Anna for committing suicide. If I had been driving the bus, it would have been a different outcome. It's not the right choice, ever. But that wasn't my choice. And so that was the first thing. So we put that she died of anorexia, which at the time I didn't know was so radical, and that it would get so much attention nationally by the press, and you know, it was incredible to me. And it was, I'm a psychologist, and it was still that incredible to me that people wouldn't get that. And then at the end of the obituary, you write about, do you want flowers, do you want donations sent to what? And I said, well, send donations to the Anna Westin Foundation. And literally, my husband looked at me like, you know, what? And I said, I don't know. I have no idea where it came from, or how we're going to do it, or what it is even. I don't even know, but it just came to me, and that's what we're going to do. And then that night, literally that night, this is a true story, I am raging. I can't sit still. I can't stop. And anybody who knows much about grief, it's one of the coping mechanisms. If you don't stop moving or talking, then you have to think about what really happened. And I didn't want to think about what really happened. So we were surrounded by all family and friends, and people. Our house was full of people. And finally, about 3 a.m., everybody fell asleep, and I wasn't asleep. And so I'm walking around the house by myself, and I'm just like, so wrapped in grief. And I finally just sit down at my kitchen table, and I say, Anna, what do you want me to do? And I wrote the goals and the mission of the Anna Westin Foundation. It just was there. And it was exactly what I'm doing today. It was advocacy, it was support, education, and it was a long-term goal. Now, how did I know this at the time? To start residential care in Minnesota, because I knew that if there had been residential care in Minnesota, Anna would be alive. And so that was like, well, that's way out there, because that costs a ton of money. So we'll never be able to do that. We just really wanted to address all those factors that contribute to an eating disorder. The things that we can control, and the things that we can have a voice in, like the media, and how the messaging that we all get. I vowed that I was going to talk about this. I was going to speak as often as I could, with passion, because I can't do it any different way, and to anyone who will listen to me. And so I do a lot of this kind of thing, because I think it's so important. We really wanted to create the access to care, because I think that's where the hope is, and we needed to be advocates. So my journey into advocacy and activism is when I had my son Jamie, who is now 41 years old, and he is profoundly mentally retarded. And I will tell you, I was 18 years old when I had Jamie. And his father is my husband today, but we were very young. We got married when we were 18 and 19 years old. And we had a son with congenital toxoplasmosis. And we knew immediately that he had lesions throughout his brain and he would be profoundly mentally retarded. And the first thing I had to do was deal with the loss of dreams. Here I'm 18 years old, kind of just starting off in life, and had no idea, just clueless about how am I going to do this. I know nothing. I'm a child myself. I shouldn't be having a child, and now I have this child with these really serious disabilities. And back in 1970, let me tell you, there wasn't much there. Not much services. So I had to learn this crash course in advocacy. And I taught myself, because I have to learn how to ask for things. I have to learn how to go up to people and say, I need this, this, and this in order to do this job. And then I have to learn how to insist. And then, the most important lesson, I have to learn how to not accept no or we can't. Because that was always the first. I need some respite care. I need somebody to come into my home and help me. And it was always no, or we can't do that, we don't offer that service. Well, that's not the right answer. And I'm not leaving until you give me the right answer, because this is necessary. And then I would do the research, and I would go to them and say, if I don't get this, you know what, this is going to happen. You know, our family will fall apart, and we'll have to place Jamie outside the home, and blah, 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 blah. So I learned it very young, and I really do attribute a lot of my advocacy and my strength and courage to parenting Jamie. So what is it? What is an advocate? An advocate really is just promotion of an idea or a cause. And grassroots advocacy, which is the kind of advocacy that I do, is just people like you and I. It's us. And we have some kind of a cause or an idea that we're promoting, and we're not paid. Most of us volunteer most of our time, pay our own way when we go to Washington. We're citizen lobbyists, and we have such a powerful voice. And the highly paid lobby, did anybody see the movie Thank You for Not Smoking? That's a really good example of highly paid lobbyists. You know, they lobby on something they don't even have to agree with. They get paid big bucks to do it. And the policymakers listen to them, and they have a lot of influence, but guess what? When we show up in their offices, we have much more influence and power, because we're real people that are their constituents that are dealing with these issues. Advocacy also increases public awareness, and we do that like through the media, any way we can get our message out there. And we do a lot of sending out press releases about what we're doing. We do a lot of calling, if I'm in a city, some of the media and saying, I'm going to be here. Would you be interested in doing a story on this? Those kind of things. And one of the things that's really important about advocacy is it gives everybody a voice, and it's so important. It's so empowering to have a voice. And it really is using that voice to make our country better, to address the issues that are injustice. And there's a lot of them in the world. And none of you, probably some of you might remember Senator Paul Wellstone. He was our late senator from Minnesota. He died in 2002 in a plane crash along with his wife, but he was a really dear friend of mine. And Senator Wellstone was the senator who introduced the first mental health parity bill in U.S. Congress back in 1996. And all that was a bill to try to make insurance companies pay for mental health coverage at the same rates and levels that they pay for any physical surgical procedure, which is parity. It's only fair. But insurance companies didn't do that, and they still don't a lot of times. And then Senator Robert Kennedy, I just love this quote. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he or she sends a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, these ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. And I've seen it happen. Most of you have probably seen this Margaret Mead quote, but it's so powerful. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So our voices are important. I'm going to spend some time on the Minnesota story because it's really what started our family on this road, on this journey to advocacy, and it really was a phenomenal change in Minnesota for people struggling with any mental health diagnosis and eating disorders. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Anna then and a private settlement and the results of that. So in October of 2000, okay, that's the date. I was trying to remember what the dates were. The then Attorney General Mike Hatch accused insurance companies, and it was our insurance company, of unwarranted delays and excuses and denials and hurdles family had to go through to get mental health coverage for their children. And it was quite interesting how that came about because after Anna died, I called up our Senator Paul Wellstone, and I didn't know him. I'd never met him. And I talked to somebody in his office that was the person in charge of his policies on mental health, and we had this long conversation. I told him a little bit of our story and who I was, and that I wanted to try to change things in Minnesota and across the country. I wanted people to get access to care that have eating disorders. And he said, you know, this is something that Senator Wellstone really cares about, and he's going to want to talk to you. U.S. Senator, and a few hours later I answer my phone. Hello, is this Mrs. Westin? Yes, it is. This is Senator Paul Wellstone. I almost fell off my chair. I mean, it was really amazing. And he said, I really care about you. I really care about this issue. I want to talk to you more about it. And so after a lot of conversations, we had him we brought him, well, he came back to Minnesota, and he came to a meeting that I called with a bunch of eating disorder professionals in Minnesota to try to work on this issue and to try to see what we could do. And Paul came and brought his wife Sheila, who I fell in love with. And it was so interesting because it was a day that it was then President Bill Clinton was in town, and he took time away because he was supposed to be taking him around Minnesota from that to come to our meeting. That's the kind of person he was. That's how much he cared. I told him he could have run for president, but he didn't. And so then Paul called not exactly a press conference, it was a meeting, and it was to include our family and some people from the eating disorder community in Minnesota, and Paul Wellstone and Jim Remstead, who's also a champion for mental health causes and addictions, and the medical directors of insurance companies in Minnesota. And of course, with a sitting senator and a sitting member of the House of Representatives, the press is there. Every station, every paper in Minnesota shows up because it's news. And we had this meeting, and only one medical director came, and he came from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, and I still can't figure out why. Nobody else showed up. I think because they felt like their feet were to the fire, and they were going to get really creamed on this, and so they sent this person. And he absolutely said things that everybody, and the press was there, and he said things that were so damaging to the insurance company that the rest of us are like, really? I was almost embarrassed for him. Not really, but just shut up, because what you're saying is really not going to help you. And the Attorney General sent a deputy Attorney General to this meeting, and he came up to Mark and I after, Mark is my husband, and said, the Attorney General is really concerned about these issues. And he gets calls all the time of people being denied mental health coverage. But he's having trouble finding any family that will come forward and talk about this real publicly. And would you be willing to do that? And we said, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, maybe a week later, he held a big press conference and made this announcement that he was going to sue the biggest insurance company in Minnesota. And Mark and I were there, and I actually spoke at that press conference, and it got tons of attention. Again, all the media was there. And after that, then the people and complaints came out of the woodwork. He had hundreds of people calling his office, and also people saying, I will step forward as well. We will talk publicly about this. And I really don't blame the people that don't want to talk publicly. I mean, I don't have, there's no judgment around that. In our case, we didn't have anything to lose, It was, we had lost everything. But a lot of people, is just not comfortable going public, and there's nothing wrong with that. But anyway, so they filed this lawsuit for all these reasons, and this piece is that what happens when people don't get covered, it gets cost shifted to the states, or the counties, or the feds, because people need treatment, and somebody's got to pay for it. And this, remember, this is all children and adolescents with any mental health diagnoses. So kids with conduct disorder, they end up in the legal system. They end up in the courts, and so all this cost shifting was going on. And there was lots of other, delays and forcing subscribers into these really awful appeals processes and denying coverage for medical necessity and all of those things. And like Anna, she would go into the hospital and they'd authorize 3 days, and then they'd say now she's medically stable and take her home, and I'd refuse. And I mean, it was just, you guys know this. This is an old drill. Most of you have probably experienced this some way or another. And that doesn't help recovery, right? When you don't know from one day to the next if you can stay if you could stay at Rosewood, you can't be very engaged. It's not fair to do that to people that are sick. And what I say to people is, and there's a really good story. My mom was 73 when Anna died. And 3 months after Anna died, she had an aortic aneurysm, and it was leaking, which is deadly. People don't survive that. And she was living in Duluth. We were able to get her airlifted from her home in Duluth to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. The Mayo Clinic is like one of the best medical clinics in the world. It's known worldwide. And we got her there, kind of in the middle of the night. The whole family drives there. We're standing around her bed, and the doctor comes in and says, okay, we're going to do the surgery. We're going to wait till the morning because we want our A team to do the surgery. And her chances of surviving the surgery are like 5%. So there's 95% chance that she will die. I mean, people don't recover from this. Do you think anybody ever questioned that? Or said, oh, wait a minute, we have to go talk to the insurance company, or maybe there's another treatment, or maybe she can get step-down care? No. She was sent right in. They brought their A team in, and she survived. And she just died 2 years ago. So, it's really interesting how Blue Cross Blue Shield responded. when the lawsuit first came out, and they actually said this. This is a quote for more than the Blue Cross pays for more than 94% of requested treatment for mental health and chemical dependency, whether it's reviewed or not. This issue is not about denying care. The issue is about providing care in the most appropriate setting. According to whom? They were setting that. That was so, I mean, it was so untrue. They were denying everything. We're really not doing this. And I can tell you, and again, you guys all know this, that when Anna was being denied the care that her team recommended that would save her life, the insurance company would come back with a whole different idea. Well, she can go on this level of care. She could do it here. They never met her. They never talked to her. They wouldn't even accept all the information. Those of you, is anybody here that does insurance? You guys, you're probably just like, oh yeah, they still do that. Sometimes when you're doing that, the insurance company won't even accept all the information from the docs. They won't read it. So, bizarre. So, 6 months later, the suit was settled. And it was settled out of court. One of the reasons it was settled out of court is because every time there was a hearing, they would call me and say, we need to fill this courtroom, and we need to, have people that care about this issue sitting there, and we need the press involved, so the press would come to those, and Blue Cross, the PR for them was horrible. And I really do believe they agreed to settle because they were being creamed, because it was a nightmare for them, that they were letting people die. They were playing Russian roulette with people's lives. And for most of us reasonable people in the world, that's not okay. They don't get to do that. So in June 2001, the suit is settled. The $8.2 million was paid back to the state for that cost shifting. They established a 3-judge review committee, which was amazing. And because judges are trained to be reasonable and impartial and to be able to make decisions very quickly. And so it was a brilliant step to have these 3 judges. And the Attorney General's office got to appoint 2, and Blue Cross Blue Shield got to pick the 3rd. So it was kind of in our favor. They had to respond within 24 hours, and that if it was an eating disorder, where was that one? They had to respond within 6 hours. So they couldn't, they couldn't say, well, we're going to spend all this time thinking about this and making this decision. These decisions were made really, really fast. They agreed to offer reasonable access to coverage for eating disorders, and I'll tell you, in Minnesota, they could have abused that reasonable, and they haven't. People in Minnesota, oftentimes, most of the times, if they have the right insurance, get the treatment they need, for as long as they need it, at the level that their team recommends. There's no other financial or other incentive for the claim reviewers. Now, what we found out as they were investigating, that there was financial incentives for the people that were doing the reviews to deny. They were getting bonuses. Now tell me, I mean, that cost my daughter's life. That is not, we should all be obsessed with that. Provide inpatient and outpatient coverage for mental health on the same level, so this is mental health parity. They couldn't discriminate against people that had mental health disorders. So that was a pretty incredible settlement. So after that, the landscape changed. It truly changed in Minnesota. All of a sudden, people were getting covered. They were getting the care they needed at the level they needed it, and everybody was really happy about that. I mean, it really changed things in Minnesota. But there's always room for improvement, not only in Minnesota, but across the nation. So, turning loss to hope. At about the same time, Blue Cross Blue Shield came to our family and offered us $1 million private settlement for wrongful death. And we hadn't even sued them. They came to us with that. And at first I said no. And the reason I said no is that I really felt like I wanted to take them to court. I wanted to fight this all the way. But I was advised that you won't win. and it'll take years. And the Attorney General said, Kitty, if you had $1 million, what would you do? And I'd say, well, we'd start residential care, then take it. Because you can start helping people now. And if you go to court, you don't know what's gonna happen. So we started the first residential, and the doors of the Anna Westin house opened in 2002. And this is the first Anna Westin house. It's in Chaska, Minnesota, which is where Anna lived and died. And we didn't operate the house, Anna Westin Foundation. We contracted that out to the Eating Disorders Institute, Park Nicollet, which is now the Melrose Institute. And then in 2008, we turned over the operations of the house to the Emily program because of the Park Nicollet built Melrose and wanted everything on campus, and we liked the idea of having a house and being off campus. So in March 2010, we opened the new Anna Westin house, and we went from 8 beds to 16 beds, so we doubled in size. And just in June or July of this year, we opened a 10-bed adolescent program. So now, and it's in a separate building. So now we have 26 residential beds. Probably the proudest thing I've done. So we're going to switch gears again and talk about the importance of having a voice. And this is, I really want everybody in this room to know how important your voice is, and that it's really important for those of us who can to use our voices to help people who are unable to use their voice for whatever reason. And there's lots of reasons that people, like when I'm the voice for Jamie, I still am. I need to be the voice for Anna. So we're going to talk about the Eating Disorders Coalition for Research, Policy, and Action, and this is where I'd like the video, if we could play it. I have a video that we just put together.
I'll try.
That talks about some of the work that the Eating Disorder Coalition does.
Do you know how to Grubber? Okay, that's this one. I'm gonna let a pro do it.
This is about a 2.5-minute video. Hot off the press.
So exciting.
I didn't even know if you'd say thing because I couldn't get it to stream on my computer this morning. I mean, I helped with the original, and so I kind of knew, I knew it was coming. finish that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the EDC. As you saw there, we do biannual lobby days, and we also do a lot of action alerts and things during the year to advocate for people. And one of the things, oh, perfect. Thank you. Had anybody gotten the information about the Disney Epcot new display? This happened last week, and they and it's really sad because Disney is this icon. It does great stuff, and they put up this new interactive display at Epcot Center, and it was so horrible. It was so demeaning, and it was talking about fat kids and how awful that is, and had these characters named, it was awful stuff. And the eating disorders community just rallied and started sending messages and got all of our people to send messages. And by Sunday, they had taken it off. They had taken it down. They're not going to do it. Which is the power of your voices. Yes, you can clap at that. That was so cool. Yes. So that's the power that you can have. And we can say, no, we won't stand for this. There are all these people that care about this issue. And this is the reason why. And so they said, well, we're going to put it back up, but we're going to change things. Okay, fine, but you're going to listen to the eating disorder experts before you put it back up, because you need to have the right message. Okay, so we're going to go through this. The Family and Friends Action Council, the Eating Disorders Coalition is a group of member organizations, and we're going to get Rosewood involved here. We're going to get Rosewood to join us. The Friends and Families Action Council is the individual. So everybody here can go to the EDC website, sign on to be part of the Family and Friends Action Council, and then you'll get all of our alerts. You'll get, you would have heard about this Walt Disney thing and would have been able to easily have offered your voice to that. So I really encourage people to sign up for that. I realize that when you're in treatment, you really need to focus on treatment. And doing advocacy and putting energy into other things is not always a good way to use energy if you're in the middle of treatment, because you need to be so focused. But when you're ready, we want everyone here to be part of this. We really do. And it's really amazing work. It's really fun work. You get to meet really cool people. This is one of my favorite slides, because that's Patrick Kennedy, Jim Ramstad, me, and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, and Mark Dayton, and who is our current governor, who used to be a senator. And this is at a press conference, and Jim Ramstad and Pat Kennedy were the champions of mental health parity and really pushed it through. That passed in 2008, the second parity bill. And I was at this press conference, and Nancy Pelosi was up to speak, and Jim saw me in the audience and pulled me up and stands me in front of the Speaker of the House. And I'm not usually starstruck in Washington. I'm out there a lot. I meet a lot of people, but I really respect and love that woman. And I realize she's behind me. And so after Jim is done, I step back, and she's kind of still behind me. She takes my hand. She holds, and I'm like, oh my God, Nancy Pelosi's holding my hand. I mean, I was like, oh. And then I said, oh, Madam Speaker, tried to get her in front of me. No, you need to be right where you are. I was blown away. Why do we do this? You count as a constituent. Wherever you came from, you're hiring these people. You're their boss. And your voice is important. We've talked about that. We have powers in numbers. When we show up there with 100 people on the Hill twice a year, there's lots of power in that. And we go into these offices in teams of 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever, and there's a lot of power. And we need to be at the table, because guess what? The insurance lobbies are at the table. And they are paying their lobbyists a ton of money. But when I go in there with my pictures of Anna, and I did a congressional hearing about parity. And it was me, and it was another woman who suffered from schizophrenia, and then it was what I called the suits. And I don't think the suits had hearts, because they were talking in terms of dollars and cents. And we were talking about real human lives. And I was told by so many people after that they looked like they looked like they didn't have a heart. They looked like robots because of what they were saying. And it was like, you know, that almost, I hope they didn't believe it themselves. I'm going to buzz through this really quickly. Because if anybody wants to come out to Washington and lobby with us, we also do lots of lobbying in individual states. But to be effective at it, there's some skills. And if you come to the EDC Lobby Day, we teach everybody these skills. We have a lobby team leader that is really experienced. Like I'm always the Minnesota lobby team leader. And so there's a leader who understands all of this and really helps the lobby team members tell their stories. And it's really important that when we do this, that we're all giving the same message, because it can be really confusing for anybody, all of us, to hear different messages from different people. So we have a unified message, and every lobby day, we have a different theme, but it's always about paying attention to the issues that people that have eating disorders face. That's the unified message. We ask people to really stay on message, because it's really easy sometimes to want to, you know, kind of veer off track and start telling a different story. We don't, usually with a member of Congress, we have 10 minutes would be a long visit. Sometimes with staffers we have 15, 20 minutes, but they go really quickly. We make really specific requests. We want you to sign on to the FREED Act. We want you to put your name there. This is how you do it. We make it really easy for people. And we say, you know, what can we do to help you? And I can't tell you how many times that I've been doing this, that I'll be a team, or especially I did some work with the professional lobbyists when I was doing mental health parity, and they would let everybody else leave the room, and they would hold me back, and they would tell me their story. And it just was amazing how that happened, because I was being genuine and real and authentic, and they felt like they could tell me their story. So what we're working on now is there's items in the Affordable Health Care Act, which some people call Obamacare. And right now, what they're working on is the Essential Benefits Package, and that's what's going to be covered in the Affordable Health Care Act. And so it's really important that people have a voice in that. And the eating disorder community is working really hard to have a voice in that. Now what's happened is the federal government in December transferred the responsibility for setting the benefits package, what's going to be covered, to each state. And so I'm not happy with that, because I would love to have it unified. I'd love every state, because it's going to vary. And I'm part of the conversations in Minnesota. So we'll probably get eating disorders in Minnesota. But if there's not an eating disorder person in Arizona, you probably won't get it in there. So it's really important. So if you haven't already, call the governor's office, find out who's making those policies for you. What we know is that mental health is the floor. It's part of the essential benefits package, the floor. And so that was really good. That was really important to get in there. So mental health will be covered, but it's just, you know, how they're going to define that. And so we want eating disorders language in that, and we want all levels of care. So what I'm fighting for in Minnesota is I want eating disorders specifically, and I want them to name the levels of care, because what it does not want to cover inpatient or residential, and we want that in there. The Mental Health Parity Act, we worked really hard to pass that. It's a pretty good bill. It's not the best bill ever. We had to take some language out at the very end, and then the FREED Act. Kind of already talked about that. These are some of the things that the EDC, the coalition, supports in the healthcare reform. And again, we already got that piece of it. They really did pass a bill that will not prevent people with pre-existing conditions to get coverage, which is huge. That was such an important part of that. No more lifetime limits on how much insurance companies will pay. That's another thing that was really important to our population. We wanted to make sure doctors make healthcare decisions. That's still up in the air. You know, we still don't know if we're going to get that. Again, the definitions is what we're working on right now. And we want the directives to be submitted to the FREED Act, because what happens with the bill is we have this big bill in Congress, and it's got 3 distinct parts. education, prevention, treatment, and research. Well, if we could get eating disorders in affordable care, we could cut out the whole treatment part of that bill. And we could pass the rest of that bill and probably pass it easier because it's not such a big bill. So I know this is confusing. There's lots of, parts and pieces to it, but that's how we work. We're always strategizing. And I love this picture. This is President Bush signing mental health parity into law. And that was a really important thing for our country. Millions and millions of people are being treated more fairly. I have to admit, some of the language we had to take out of the bill was the comprehensive language that included eating disorders. And at the end of the day, this is another true story. I was out there lobbying for this all the time. I kind of almost lived on the Hill for a while. And I was working very closely with the House members and the senators that were promoting this bill. And at the end, when they needed to put the final bill forward, and it's all about compromise, they sat me down, and it was Ted Kennedy, Pat Kennedy, and Jim Rumstead, and said, "Can you live with this?" And told me what they would take out, and I said, "Well, I don't like it, but if that's the best we can do right now, it's better to pass a bill and get something, because then you can go back and revise it." So it's a pretty good bill. What happened at the end of the day is the insurance companies and businesses get to decide what they cover, which is really bad for users. You meet really fun people when you're out in DC. You get to hang out with some people, and I love this. I got a personal card from Rosewood Carter, who is former President Jimmy Carter's wife, and she's worked on mental health parity her whole career. That's been her issue, mental health. And she wrote me this beautiful note. "Thank you for all your hard work that made parity possible. I will forever be indebted to you." I mean, this is from former First Lady. It was like, no, I'm really indebted to you. But, it's fun stuff. I think we've already talked about this. I don't want to spend a lot more time, but this is the current bill that we're pushing through Congress. When we go out to Washington in April, we're trying to get more people to sign on, co-sponsors of the bill. Because the more you can get to sign on, when it goes to the floor for a vote, the more likely you're going to get a vote in your favor. It's really interesting to me. It's gotten really partisan out in Washington. And the last congressional sessions, last 2 years, the last congressional session, we had both Republicans and Democrats signed on to our bill. And it wasn't hard getting both Republicans and Democrats. Now with the new Congress, the 112th Congress, none of the Republicans that had signed on before will sign on. Isn't that sad? I mean, I think to me that's just, and we've talked to them, and we've said, really, explain this to me. Why was it okay last session? Well, it's so partisan out there that everybody's afraid for their jobs, and if anything looks at all, and our bill has Democratic sponsors, it looks like a Democratic bill, even though we tell them it's not. And even they know that. So it's frustrating, but you know what? It's going to swing the other way. It's going to change, and we'll pass this bill. And I am certain of that. And when we do, it's going to be an amazing thing. So again, just some of the things that we don't know about eating disorders. Why is it so important for us to do this work? These are the reasons. It's eating disorders are deadly. They affect everybody. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know somebody or hasn't had an experience with eating disorders. They're really expensive. They're not only expensive to treat, but there's all the other psychological problems and the physical complications and impact on caregivers. I mean, it would be so much better if we covered the cost when somebody had an eating disorder. It'd be wonderful if we had, if we could educate and raise awareness and do good prevention programs. We have lots of things we want to do with this bill. People with eating disorders can be treated. Ooh, that's me. Sorry. I always tell people to turn off their cell phones. Sorry. No, I'm really red-faced. Only 1 in 10 receives the treatment they need. And that's, to me, so sad. The price is too high. I can name so many people that have lost their lives to eating disorders. And death ends a life, not a relationship. And I really think it's our responsibility to be talking about this. And to have no shame and to, you know, get out of the stigma and talk openly about this, because these are real illnesses. And everybody who has a real illness. I don't care if it's breast cancer, I don't care if it's diabetes, I don't care if you get in a car accident and break your leg, and I don't care if it's an eating disorder. Everybody deserves access to the care they need to be healthy. The next EDC Lobby Day is April 24th. It's actually up now on the website if anybody's interested. Again, this is probably not going to be the time for the clients here in the room to participate because you're so focused on your treatment, which you absolutely need to be. But we do this twice a year. And so anytime anybody wants to join us, please do. It's such an important thing to do. Some ways to get involved. I brought cards, so if anybody wants to get involved and wants to contact me, please do. A new organization has been created, which Rosewood is a part of. It's called the Red Sea Residential Eating Disorders. I think it's consortium, not coalition, but it's residential programs who from across the country have come together and said, we're not standing for this. We're going to fight and really working on the essential health benefits and trying to get eating disorders named. So people are really working hard at this stuff. This is a final quote, and I think Anna left this as a gift for me. It was one of the last things she wrote in her journal. And I really do think it was a gift. May all your love, joy, and pain, all your fears and desires lead you to your own promises. May your dreaming never end and your voice never die. And I'm giving that to you as a gift. So, that's it. We have about 15 minutes because I wanted to make sure we had time for comments, questions. I'm open to anything. Again, I have some cards. I'm happy. I'm going to leave them up here. Please grab one. The other thing I brought is this little card. It's a little advocacy card that an advocacy group that I worked with at the Emily program put together. And I think every place I bring it, the people are just like, yeah, we want to do that. So I'm going to offer this so you can steal this idea. Those of you who do groups, who's the person that does groups here? There you go. The group was talking to me about how sometimes they're on an outing or they're doing something and people say horrible things that are really insulting and lets them know that they are so clueless about eating disorders, but they really don't want to engage in a conversation or do the education themselves because, you know what, they don't need to do that. And I said, you know, the autism world has these little business-sized cards that if parents or caregivers are out with somebody with autism and the kid is acting up or having a tantrum and people are staring or making comments, why don't you control your kid, what's wrong with you, you don't have any parenting skills, the parent can hand the person this card and they don't have to engage in a big conversation. So we stole that from autism and it really is about 4 or 5 facts, really brief about eating disorders, and then on the other side, it's just how to contact us, the Emily program. And I really do encourage everybody to steal this idea, because it's so good. And I see them all over the place. I see them in gyms, I see them in restaurants, they show up every place. So I think they're kind of effective. So, any questions, comments? Yes?
How many people show up for the lobbyist program?
We usually have about 100 citizen lobbyists, and it's usually a mix of people that have struggled with an eating disorder, they can still be struggling, they can be recovered, whatever, family, friends, professionals, and we'd like it to grow. We would love to have 200 people sometime.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for the message and hope for coming, visit in Arizona and coming to Rosewood. Are you available for a few questions if they come up to you?
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Awesome. So I just want to thank you again.
You're welcome. I just want to say that you are my heroes for being here, for working so hard to fight your eating disorders, and the staff for doing this kind of work. This is what keeps me going. So thank you for doing this hard work. All right.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.